In majority of Muslim families, one matter that is emphasized and is strictly enforced from early childhood is the blind faith. In a typical Muslim family, the notion of blindly following the religion is taught and preached strongly to ensure that it is stamped into the child's mind. Some argue that the word faith implies that it should be followed blindly. Blind faith is an ideology that whatever is presented as a part of the faith must be followed without asking for reason, logic, or rationale. Questioning any part of the faith is on one side, even a question about its rationality is strictly forbidden. In some cases, even thinking about logic or reason is considered as a sin and devil's thought. The issue of blind following does not stop at the faith level. It is almost equally enforced in all aspects of life as being a Muslim, and even goes beyond to the Muslim history. That is, whatever is presented today as Islamic faith, Islamic way of life, or even Muslim history, we are required to accept them blindly without any argument. When issues arise in the present day life related to family matters, social interactions, or religious affairs, we are forced to blindly follow the verdict written in the thick manuals of Sharia more than 1,000 years ago without asking a question. Any Muslim, especially young Muslims growing up in the West, who are generally more open-minded and curiosity-driven, when asked questions about fundamentals of Islam based on logic and reasoning, usually received an admonishment from parents, religious teachers, or imam not to ask questions. Their main argument usually is that this is what has been taught to us, we are following it, and you should follow it without questions and arguments. As a result, some of these young Muslims follow the instructions and stop questioning and normally becomes fundamentalist, while majority of them get confused and frustrated. Their confusion and frustration arise from the fact that their minds are intellectually trained to look at everything from realistic and rational and logical aspects. However, when it comes to matters related to religion, they are forced to suppress their intellect and accept things without logic and reason, which their minds are not willing to accept. This conflict between their inner self and the emotional and often angry verdict from their parents or other elders directly impact the lives of these youths. Those who are not strong enough to take an intellectual stand often adapt a non-conflicting path, that is, at home or within Muslim community events, they follow the traditional practice to keep their parents happy, while in their private lives, they live their own ways. On the other hand, those who are strong enough to take an intellectual stand often move themselves away from Islam. The irony is that these young Muslims find no clear guidance on how to handle this dilemma of either choosing an extreme measure or crushing their intellect or personality. The scarcity of guidance is primarily due to the lack of questioning the fundamental cause of this issue. Is Islam really based on blind faith? Does Islam forbid questioning and arguments? Do we have to follow what our forefathers were following blindly without asking a question? The source that can provide answers to these questions is Quran. In the present-day practice, even questioning or arguing any act of fiqh, which was written long after Prophet Muhammad's death, is strictly forbidden and is considered as an act of rebellion against Islam. Now imagine what would be the situation if someone argues about the reason or rationale for the laws, rules, and other instructions given in Quranic verses. In present-day circumstances, this person would probably be declared heretic for asking the rationale or logic behind Quranic verses. Some religious extremists may perceive this issue as a challenge to God. Now let's see what Quran's stance about blind faith. Quran describes one of the qualities of mu'mins as, and those who, when they are reminded of the revelations of their sustainer, they do not fall on them deaf and blind. Chapter 25, verse 73. That is, the moments are those who do not even accept and follow Quran's verses blindly, but they accept them based on logic and reason. This is the standard set by the Quran. It means that even Quran does not demand its followers to accept its verses blindly, and therefore there is no reason to accept Hadith and Fiqh blindly. The reason for not following Quran's message blindly is very clear if you think from logical aspect. A firm belief or trust in any law or principle would only be achieved if you knew the logic and rationale behind its implementation and possible consequences of obeying or disobeying it, either on an individual level or collectively at the societal level. If you are forced to obey a law without knowing the rationale and its consequences, without being convinced, you will not have a firm belief or trust in that law, and you will obey it under compulsion. Quran declared, there is no compulsion in Islam. Chapter 2, verse 256. No one can force anyone to obey Islam. A person should follow Islam after understanding its framework and consequently the benefits based on logic and reasoning. That is why throughout the Quran, a great emphasis has been placed on accepting its message based on logic and reasoning. And as a matter of fact, Quran discourages blind acceptance. There are several verses in the Quran that have put significant emphasis on understanding Quran's message and other signs in nature that clarify the message and its rationale. It declares that those who do not think and understand and only follow instructions blindly are even worse than animals. And most certainly have we destined for hell many of the jinn and humans who have hearts but do not use it to think, and eyes but do not use them to see, and ears but do not use them to hear. They are like cattle, nay, they are even less conscious. Chapter 7, verse 179. Another verse, means of insight have now come unto you from your sustainer. Whoever therefore chooses to see, does so for his own good, and whoever chooses to remain blind, does so for his own hurt. Chapter 6, verse 104. Quran nullifies the argument that one should follow a path blindly because it is the same path followed by their forefathers. It says, and if they are told, follow what Allah has sent down, they say, no, we will follow what we found our fathers doing. What if their fathers did not comprehend anything and were not guided? Chapter 2, verse 170. It is the irony that these same arguments that the opponents used at the time of Prophet Muhammad are now used by our religious class, without comprehending that their core argument for blind following is fundamentally against Quran, the source of their faith. Blindly following something that is presented as Islam through generations and believing that we are on the right path is not enough to prevent one from the disastrous consequences, the hell. Living on an assumption that whatever conveyed to us as Islam is right without confirming its authenticity and filtering through logic and reasoning does not make one on the right path. Quran has a clear verdict on it. It says, and whoever turns away from the remembrance of the Almighty, we appoint a devil to be his associate, and they hinder from the path, but they think they are guided. Can you make the deaf hear, and can you guide the blind and those who are far astray? Chapter 43, verses 36 to 40. Pay attention to the text. They think they are guided. It is the responsibility of every single person who claims to be a Muslim to explore and seek the right path using Quran as the guiding source, but using rationality, logic, and reasoning. Living under self-delusion as being guided has no validity. The jurisprudence of Muslim Sharia does not give the right to challenge the verdict of those who it declares as authority on rational and logical basis. As a result, the life of a common Muslim is held hostage at the mercy of those who themselves are blind followers of their forefathers' religion and a strong opponent of thinking and reasoning. It is important to note that questioning something does not imply its denial, but rather an attempt to seek the truth. Thinking is like a flow of a stream that navigates through ups and downs, interacts with different landscapes, and finds its way to move forward while maintaining its freshness. Thinking brings fresh ideas through curiosity and provides tools to safely navigate through the uncharted waters of the changing world. The forbiddance of thinking in the Muslim world has confined this supposedly flowing stream of curiosity, rationality, and logic into a pool of stagnant water that, being in that state for more than a millennium, has become rotten. Such rotten pool leads to hate, intolerance, brutality, narcissism, and irrationality. Any fresh water added to this pool eventually becomes rotten. It is critical to break the barriers and let the water start flowing again. It is crucial to open the debate on Islam and let new ideas and fresh interpretations using rational thinking flow into the domain of the religion that will assist in the integration and adaptation of Islam into the changing modern world. Thank you.